There's never been a better time to have SiriusXM. With over 140 channels in your vehicle, your all-access trial includes more than ever before to enjoy online, on your phone, or at home. Create your own ad-free personalized stations powered by Pandora. Hear ad-free extra channels and enjoy favorite shows with SiriusXM Video on Demand. What you love is on now.
Hey guys, what's going on? Thanks for tuning in to another session of CMA Connected presented by SiriusXM. I'm your host, Ben Wu, welcoming you to this week of June. It's a scorcher over here. We actually have a heat warning. Can you believe it? Out in the Maritimes, a heat warning. So it is a hot one. Hope everybody's staying safe and whoever is be dealing with this heat warning. And speaking of heat, the product we're going to be talking about today is a little bit on fire for that matter. We're talking about Wavtech, much more than just an LOC. And to join us today to talk to us about that is, of course, the 12-volt specialist known as Romesh. I call him Roku. Maybe a couple others do too, from Importel. What's going on, Romesh?
Hey, Ben. How you doing?
Spent a beautiful weekend. I heard that you and I did maybe similar activities being on the water yesterday.
Yep, on the water, getting
some
baked.
rays, getting baked. Baked or raised, there's two different things.
Oh, well, oh, wow. Oh, Lord. Here we go.
All right. So wanted to kick off this week with something that is a critical tool, in my opinion, in the toolbox of technicians and installers. You know, with so many things evolving on the OE side of things, you know, these manufacturers surprise us with more and more surprises as time moves forward. You know, just the other day I was on a Connected. I can't remember with who, but somebody mentioned, oh, no, I remember it was live. And it was Nick Wingate had said, you know, he's dealing with a Dodge Ram with 32 channels of active signal. And then, you know, the whole thing is just, in my opinion, getting a little bit ridiculous. But thank goodness that there are brands and products out there that are coming up with solutions. And Wavtech is one of those brands.
Well, it's ridiculous, but it sounds great, right?
Well, I guess at the end of the day, that's what counts.
It sounds better than the new truck buyer's previous vehicle. And in our case, we're obviously, as an aftermarket, trying to make them sound even better, right? So those 32 channels, we need ways to get into there. And the standard LOC is, your basic LOC. It's just not the way anymore.
Well, LOCs have been around, I mean, forever. Everybody knows what they are. Everybody's used them. And, you know, we've had Jason Kemmerer from Wavtech on with us before. But it's important that we continue to message the importance of this device and this lineup of products, not only from a solutions base, but from an as a performance type product as well.
Absolutely. The knowledge base that our dealers have and the experience base is huge. And with new products coming out, sometimes we kind of, like I was saying backstage, back in 2000, you start getting a system together, you kind of reach behind you on the wall, you grab an LOC and you kind of plopped it on the table because you never had to give any thought to it. There's a signal, I just tap into it and away I go. And we never had to consider things like, gosh, I won't get too far into it. I'll probably steal some of Jason's thunder, but things like, how much power is that amplified system making? And will that LOC, will we blow a hole right through it and have smoke come out of it? Mm-hmm. Right. And that doesn't make LOCs, of poor quality or it's not a quality issue. It's an application issue and knowing which application to use what product. Whereas, 20 years ago, we didn't have to consider that.
No, that's right. And today, what I really want to zone in on with Jay is to get the message across so that shops, retailers understand that these are the type of products that you need and why. And I'm going to definitely get those questions and answers extracted from Jay. That's my job today. All right.
Absolutely. Yep.
On that note, why don't we bring him on? Jason Kemmerer from Wavtech from sunny California. Sir, welcome once again to the show. How you doing, Jay?
Hey, Ben. Good to see you again.
Hey, Jay. How's it going?
Hey, Russ.
Great to see you. We've had some great sessions where you've pretty much trained us on all things Wavtech, but of course we expect nothing less today. But really what I want, when dealers get to watch this, and maybe whether it's live or on demand, that they understand, that they connect the dots as to why your products make that much of a difference.
Sure, exactly, and we'll get into that in a little bit, I imagine. But as you guys were just discussing, you can't get away with regular high to lows anymore. Not only because of voltage, but also because of the loading issues, which create the heat, and also because of sound quality issues. And the factory systems are much better than they used to be back in the day. So just sticking a transformer based, resistor based high to low in there is not going to get you all the performance that the customer's expecting when they put in good quality aftermarket amps and speakers. So it's across the board reasons, and the application, as you guys were talking about.
And what I really, maybe what the people listening in need to understand is that this is a product line that came out from need, that there was a need. Can you talk to us a little bit, Jay, about the story of how this was developed and the whole pedigree of the product, if you will?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you guys know my history. I mean, I was with Alpine for many years, and started off as an installer, going way back into the mid '80s. So, seeing it from an installer's point of view for many years, and then as a product planner and developer, developed everything from amps to speakers to DSPs to head units and all that kind of stuff. Became really familiar with what the challenges were, and certainly as when I was designing amplifiers, I found that there was some application issues out there. So this was in my head going way back. And then of course my partner Mike, we founded this company together late 2015. We looked at the market and just said, there really isn't, there hasn't been any innovation in this market for many years. It's the same old stuff, but the vehicles have changed, the applications have changed. So we saw a real need for a high-end, high-performance, yet wide application line out there, instead of, one of the directions that things were going was all the vehicle-specific stuff. And, when I was product director at Scotia, I saw it from the opposite end, from the replacement end, right, with all the kits and the bus adapters and all that kind of stuff, and just seeing the fact that in many cases you end up spending more on the installation accessories than the actual head unit itself. And I'm like, this is just wrong. And not only that, but because the factory systems had gotten so much better, and in a lot of cases the sound performance was worse. So that'll combine, and Mike and I got together. It's, we can do better. And so we formed Wavtech for the specific mission of providing better integration solutions that were easy to install and really were easy to carry for dealers by having a focused lineup. And that wasn't easy, and that's why it took a year and a half basically, and I spent in designing and developing these products, to out of the box to do everything right. And we of course we've also gained some experience having our own product out in the field, and we take feedback directly, and I've already made, I think, 3 running changes just to add features or change a little bit here, not the core sound quality or anything, but just more application and installation related stuff, like moving the auto turn on jumpers to the outside, or adding bypass jumpers for things and whatnot. So we're really on top of it as a smaller company. We're just focused on this one category, and that's where we put all of our effort.
Definitely, and it shows. And while we're on that topic of this category, Romesh, my question to you as a distributor, especially in Canada, are from an awareness standpoint, are dealers calling in saying, "Hey, I need this Link or this Wavtech product," or are they saying, "Hey, I got an issue. What do you have for me?" I'm curious.
It's both, but it's both based on where you are in your experience with OE integration and Wavtech. So typically the very first call is, I'm stuck, and it's usually after you've got a typical LOC in there, or another even more advanced, quote unquote, more advanced product, but not a Wavtech product. And what happens is, hey, they call in, they go, "I bought this thing, man, I'm stuck. I know you didn't sell it to me sometimes. What do I do?" And that's where the Wavtech product typically shines. We we send out a piece, they put it in, it solves the immediate issue. And then the future calls are, hey, that Wavtech thing, do you remember which one it was that I bought last time? I need another one, or I need a case, right? And then that's where the dealers, the guys that are ordering 12s and 24s at a time, have come from. It hasn't been kind of selling into the business. It's been more selling out based on solutions and experience.
Okay, and that and we're going to circle back to this obviously when Jay goes through a little bit of the product presentation. But does that surprise you, the answer that Romesh just provided?
No, I mean, I was just thinking, one of the big things, especially for retailers, is time is money, and if they're spending more time trying to make a passive LOC or whatnot sound good, that time could have been spent doing something else more profitable. And once the dealers get the experience with using the Wavtech products, they realize, man, it's not only does this work, but it makes everything sound better because of the headroom and the gain structure and all that kind of stuff, signal and noise. That the cost difference between that and a passive is really not that much. And certainly you can't even use a passive for a lot of these applications that require anything electronic like summing or EQ or whatnot. So yeah, the more experience, the more hands-on dealers get with these products, I think they just realize, I'm not even gonna waste my time with this other stuff anymore, and they shouldn't, because it guarantees better performance.
I was talking to a shop the other day, and I just was probing him and just kind of getting a feel for how they feel about Wavtech and whatnot. And one of the things he says is, we have the cheap LOCs behind me on the counter for anybody that walks in and just says, I need one of these. But the stuff we actually install, we're going to the Wavtech stuff. That was the answer he gave me. Yeah, good point. And when you feel and see and feel the product, you realize that it's not just an inexpensive little plastic box. I mean, these things are basically little miniature amplifiers. They have I'll pull up in an older model here so you can see what they look like inside. I mean, 4-layer circuit boards. We're using high-end op amps. Dedicated power supplies so you can get over 10 volts RMS out, differential balance inputs. I'll get into all that stuff, but there's a lot that goes into designing these products, just not a couple of resistors and transformers on the board. I'm gonna make you a promise, Jay.
Yeah.
Whenever I put my system together, which is obviously procrastinating, I will I'm going to use a Wavtech, and I'm going to put a plexi piece on it and showcase it in the system. Be
right
like, see if anybody can figure out what that is.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
All right. Very, very cool. No, it looks really sharp. I'm happy you showed the internals there, just so people understand that it's not like just a chip.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No. Or a capacitor.
No, they're actually quite complex. It's a preamp. It's a true preamp like you'd find in high-end home audio, just miniaturized for car applications. So.
Absolutely. We'll get into the preamp voltage specs and everything in a second. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Romesh, before we get into it?
Well, you touched on an interesting point there, Ben, earlier when we were talking about salespeople out front. What's interesting about this CMA Connected is often they're aimed toward installation installer, and this is actually an interesting conversation because the sale gets made up front. And the salesperson up front is amassing all the parts and building a quote and what's going to go out back for the installer to install. And when we send a Wavtech piece out back, even if the salesperson out front didn't know that it needed a certain amount of load or needed load generation or what have you, or needed link LDs for, let's say, a Chrysler or Ram vehicle, the installer doesn't have to redo the install. And that's what Jason was talking about, was time in the bay, right? So the salesperson selling the product, the guy in the bay is installing the product, but if he has to do a re of a converter, not only do they have to change the quote or eat the difference on the profitability of the deal, but they're losing the shop labor. But for the installer in the back, he's able to just plug in a link LD and go about his business, right? In the case where there isn't enough load inside the box, the unit itself, right? So they all do have load within them, but that gets out of this whole front back salesperson installer, either who's to blame, where the issue is, and the lost profitability on the deal, right? And that was the big thing that Jason was talking about, is the profitability, in the bay, and making sure that everything happens and the customer gets their vehicle delivered on time, right? And not having to try and find these solutions.
Yeah, that's one of those age-old problems that, going way back in the day, there was always that little bit of conflict, going on between the install bay and the sales floor, where they'd sell a system and then they get the parts back in the bay, and you go, what did you even look in the car? I mean, you don't have to worry about that so much with these products, because they're going to work, and with whatever application rolls through, you just got to get the right number of channels and all that.
From a sales perspective, and I'll bring my experience in sales. This is one of those items where you could how can I explain this? You literally look at the customer and say, this is something that you need. In fact, I won't even install the rest of the system if you don't have this in.
And they don't know that they need it, right? And
they don't know. It's your job to tell them.
And it takes a qualified sales floor to tell them, if you want your factory system to sound good, you like that fully integrated radio, and you don't want to mess with it. Oh yeah, no, I want to keep that. I just want it to sound better. I want to add some bass. It's like, well, this is what you need. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's right in there. I mean, it doesn't matter what it costs. This is what you need. Do you want the system or not?
Exactly.
So that's kind of the situation. But it's fun that there's a bunch of features built in there that are like what I call added value features that we could definitely roll into.
Yeah, for sure.
So why don't we go ahead and bring this up? I know you have a presentation here.
Sure.
You want to prep that for me real quick? Put that in nice presentation mode, and away we go.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Yeah, as I was saying, one of our core missions when we started this brand was to simplify things, and that's why we use the term integration simplified. It's because the lineup is so focused on what it needs to do that once you understand the basics behind what we call the Wavtech DNA, why we sound better, why we work the way we do, it's just a matter of application differences between the models, because the core design follows through all the way through the line. And because we did everything from the ground up, there's consistency from model to model. You don't have one model puts out this voltage, the other model has no loading. This, everything is the same except for the features and number of channels. So with that, kind of what we started talking about actually is why this category exists and why it hasn't existed in the past. It's been around for a long time. And back in the day, there was a valid reason to replace a radio, because they didn't sound very good. They didn't have a screen or whatever. And even today, there's still some base radios that have, small little squinto visions that, you're probably going to want to replace. But even those systems, come with some kind of integration need. And if you want to keep that radio, you're still going to end up with maybe summing in that case, with the case of the Silverado. And Tacoma's obviously very popular truck. Those radios come with a lot of features. And in this particular example, if you didn't know it, if you ripped out that radio, you actually are going to make the system sound worse if you don't replace it with a radio that has time correction, because the factory system has an all-pass filter, phase EQ on the driver's front side, so prevents a mid-bass cancellation and gives you better staging. But yeah, like I said, OEM radios are much better than they used to be, and conversely, aftermarket radio sound performance has become less of a priority over features. You can have everything but the kitchen sink built into an AV head unit. Something has to give, and usually that tends to be the sound performance. I mean, 4-volt, 5-volt decks back in the day used to have a little outboard DC to DC converter. There was a true preamp, but now in a lot of cases just step down speaker level voltage, which doesn't necessarily sound that great. So there's a sound quality reason, obviously, but even with aftermarket radios that are 4-volt or 5-volt decks, and that's what I want to lead into the preamp part of this conversation, is that say you put in a deck and 4 using deck power, and add a sub to that and use the RCA pre-outs for the sub. Well, most radios clip well before the speaker level, the speaker volume distorts well before you get to maximum volume, whereas the pre-outs only make that 4 or 5 volts when you turn the radio all the way up. So you've got this huge gain imbalance between where the full range speakers start distorting and where you want to be with the sub level. And that's where one of the reasons why all of our products except one are actually line drivers as well. So especially the 2-channel pieces that I'll get into, for adding bass, there's nothing better than having that dynamic range and ability to gain match. And here's just a quick illustration of what that looks like. Like this radio, the one I have on my bench here, actually clips at about volume 21 out of 35. But at that volume, the RCA pre-outs are only half a volt. So what does that make you do? It makes you turn the gain all the way up on your bass amp, which sounds like junk. It just, you lose all of your dynamic range, and you don't have that kind of impact. And typical customer response to that change in sound would just be like, I had my gains like almost all the way up before, but now they're all the way down and it hits twice as hard. Well, that's a customer explaining in layman's terms what dynamic range sounds like.
Jason,
and noise floor. Yeah.
Question for you. Are you trying to say that even with these aftermarket radios, you're still suggesting that this is a unit that people include in their installs? Just from the line driving side of things?
Absolutely. They're not just a high to low, they're a pre, particularly for cases where you have a huge gain imbalance, like I was saying with using deck power and mixing that with the RC pre-out.
But I mean, these radios are saying they got 5-6 volt pre-out.
Yeah, but that's only at full volume, like I'm saying. That's only when they're turned all the way up, and then the speaker outputs out of the radio is no longer usable. And even then, even if it is a true 5 volts, it doesn't have the same level of signal and noise and reserve power and low output impedance is another big deal for system noise. So we're everything from noise floor to dynamic range to just overall sound performance is a good reason to add it on, particularly when you're adding a sub on to a deck. So. It's still there?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Sorry, went a little quiet there for a second.
Yeah, no. Absorbing what you're saying. Absorbing what you're saying.
So this is the last part on here. You guys don't have to read all the detail, but just to kind of summarize what I was saying earlier about the difference between a true preamp and passive high to lows that may have been the traditional go-to is really significant, and it's not just about high voltage versus standard BTL radios. Like some people out there believe, oh, you only need an active LOC in the case of high voltage. Well, okay, but do you really want 20% distortion in your bass response? Do you really want the thing to melt even though it's at a moderate volume? It can still melt. And what about noise isolation and all that? And that's just the basic. But I mean, all of our preamps, they have better signal and noise, better THD, better wideband frequency response than virtually any amplifier on the market. So it's like they always used to say, what's the perfect amplifier or preamp? It's a straight wire with gain. Well, that's about as close as we're going to come to that. And these basically just get out of the way of what you want your system to sound like, and just unleashes the sound performance of your components without limiting it. Whereas passive high to lows, they step on it, And I think we're getting a little bit towards that discussion where when you pre-sell these things up at the counter before you go out back. I mean, when you hold one of these things and you're explaining to the customer, well, you also want to get some quality RCA interconnects, because you want to maximize the signal quality and stability between your components. Are you going to do that with a passive little plastic box LC line high to low? I don't think so. So, and then obviously on top of that are all the things you can do with a electronic active preamp, which is the much higher signal voltage tolerance for those corner case vehicles, true gain, which makes it a preamp, right? Summing, EQ, crossover, auxiliary input switching, that kind of stuff. So that's really just to position it in your minds what a true preamp is. This is the new head unit. This is what your whole sound system sees as the head unit in the signal chain. And if you treat it like that, you're really going to get much better sound performance and bang for your buck, and the customer is going to be happy. So with that, like I was saying, I mean, our focus was a consolidated, tight lineup with maximum application, and actually we've had one or two more models, and we've consolidated. Actually, we just merged 3 models into one for the Link DQ, but with 6 total models, we have 95% vehicle coverage. I mean, 95% of the vehicles that could possibly come through your door, you can you can integrate with them and upgrade the sound system with this small lineup. So it's extremely easy to carry. And once you understand, like I was saying, the core DNA and why we sound the way we sound and why we work the way we work, the rest is just application, just knowing how many channels you're dealing with, and maybe does the customer have an auxiliary source or that kind of thing. Do they need a master volume in that car because it's got some crazy volume dependent EQ curve or something? But 2-channel all the way up to 8-channel, and the 4, 6, and 8 are our summing processors. And because of the true preamp nature and the auxiliary input, and I'll get into that in a little bit, particularly like the Link 4 and Link 6, for example, these get used a lot for standalone systems as well, where you don't even have a traditional radio as a source. You have, a Bluetooth dongle or a smartphone. But because of the way we've designed the product, it actually gives you full control over the system with independent bass level and all that. So the only model that's not a line driver in the sense that it taking low level inputs is the Link 2, which is just a high level input only. So there's just really like one slide here. This covers all of our DNA, and once you kind of understand why we did things the way we did, then the rest of the lineup, just understanding what goes where is pretty easy to understand. So already talked about line output converter or line driver. All of our models, whether it's the Link DQ, except for the Link 2, but Link DQ, bass restore, and then all of the multi-channel pieces either have an RCA input or an aux input, so you can use them as a straight up line driver. But line driver in the sense of LOC, it's one of those wordplay kind of things where traditionally line output converter has meant step down only, but because these are true preamps, we can actually get up over 10 volts RMS from any source at any voltage, all the way up to 40 volts RMS. So, there's vehicles out there like the BMW Harman Kardon system that's like 28 volts with those little underseat subs, or there's the B&O systems that can be high voltage, and that may not be on all channels, but certainly to be able to deal with that and still provide gain to the other channels for level matching for the whole system response point of view is so vastly much better for signal noise and dynamic range in the system. And that's one of the reasons, having designed all these from the ground up, why we approached things the way we did. We actually have a dual input range on the speaker level inputs, and that's because if you try to deal with everything from half a volt all the way up to 40 volts with one VR, one potentiometer, you're never going to get the thing set right. It's gonna be so twitchy, you're never going to get your gains set right, and there's going to be a much worse tolerance difference between left and right channels as well. And the fact of the matter is that the majority of the vehicles out there are BTL, traditional chipsets that are about 8 to 10 volts RMS. So having the ability to attenuate or add gain is a big deal. But to make it more focused, we split into 2 ranges from 2 to 20 volts and up 4 to 40 volts. And the default is the 2 to 20 because that's the majority of the cars. But the other huge reason to do that, and anybody that's done any kind of circuit design, you'll know having a huge gain range also is pretty bad for signal and noise. And because we're all about sound quality, that's where both my partner and I have come from, and competitors and installers. It's all about sound quality and making it easy to use. And so both of those things combine into why we did the front end the way we did. And then, of course, the RCA and aux inputs, they'll take up to 5 volts RMS, so they'll work with any aftermarket radio. Balanced differential inputs, that's, of course, for noise rejection, for common mode noise rejection. And the low impedance outputs, was I touched on, this used to be a thing that was talked about a lot way back. What's the output impedance? That doesn't really get talked about anymore, probably for good reason, because it's not very good in a lot of products. But ours is less than 50 ohms, and basically what that means is that the output stage is effectively a current source. It's not going to be influenced by any external noises, and it's such a small ratio of the input impedance of the amplifier that there's really no chance for noise to get into the system. And because of that, you can connect 8, 10 plus amplifiers off of one pair of our RCA outs and just keep splitting it, because it's got plenty of voltage and low impedance to drive that. Another thing that came out of obviously our installer background, but also, doing the circuit from the ground up, was the auto turn on, where I think we're still the only ones that have independent auto turn on mode. And from day one, we had the idea that, once you're installing this thing and you tuck it behind the dash, you're not going to want to did I flick it over to remote, or was it an audio detector, DC? You don't have to remember that with our products, because they're both on from the outset. And in fact, many products, especially those that have been on the market for a long time, didn't even have audio detect. They were DC offset only, which means that only works with BTL head units. What if you want to plug in, an iPod to it, or what if it's a Class D factory system or high voltage factory system? It doesn't have DC offset. So that's why we have the audio detect, and the audio detect is active on both the RCA or aux inputs and the speaker level. So, no matter what, when you put it in, it's going to work. You may want to turn one of them off, depending on, does the vehicle have sustained noise or something on the system just kind of keeping it awake? Well, you can bypass either one independently also. And that was one of the running changes I mentioned. These used to be jumpers on the inside. We've now moved them to the outside, where we used to have some ground jumpers that were kind of a legacy industry thing. And we found that basically they're obsolete. Modern vehicles just don't need that, especially because of the way we did our high-end differential balance input stage. It's just completely sensing the load and not involved with it. So, of course, with all that auto detect, auto turn on stuff, you got to have a generator remote out. So we have that, and that can drive 3 or 4 relays, because it's well over 500 milliamps capable. And as you guys were talking about the loading, as Romesh was talking about, this is a big deal for installers, because traditionally these kind of products have not had any loading, or if they do, they may have been the wrong kind of loading. But ours is all of our models have always had loading since day one, and what that means is it's going to work for the vast majority of vehicles. The special cases, like the newer Chrysler, since like 2015 and up, it was one loading requirement, and then 2018 and up, it changed a little bit and started getting into the amplified systems. But if you plug in any of our products and you don't get sound, you just need a little bit more loading, right? But if you didn't have loading built in, you'd be chasing your tail for an hour trying to figure out, why don't I have sound? Why isn't it working, right? So it'll save you a heck of a lot of time. And so loading goes actually all the way back to the late 90s, early 2000s with some European vehicles, and since then it's kind of proliferated into various platforms. But we have enough loading built in for the vast majority of the vehicles, and we have a little plug-in module called the Link LD that's for those Chryslers and other vehicles that allows that to be adapted. But there are some cases where you don't want the loading, and that's why also on all of our models you can actually bypass it with the jumpers inside. But I should say another huge reason to have, and one of the reasons why I put it in from the very beginning, is there are some Class D factory head units, not even non-amplified or Class D, so they wouldn't have DC offset, hence the audio detect. But also, if you don't provide any load to the output filter on a Class D, you're going to get a horrible system hash, just hiss in the background. It might even just wipe out the slew rate of your op amps on the input, and it'll just really sound bad. So having some loading on there keeps that Class D output filter under control, and another reason to do it that way. So, and then lastly, just installation related, you look at the product, and like I was saying, when you're tucking the thing away, you don't want to have to deal with something. Well, if you're tucking something away and all of a sudden your system doesn't work, you didn't realize that the harness got pulled out. That's why we focused on detail, like having locking terminals. They're pretty tough to pull out. You give them a good tug, but they're not going to come out when you're tucking them away. And just making it robust as possible, small as possible, which was a huge engineering challenge to put all the circuitry into these tiny little chassis. But the panel mount RCA jacks, just so you can step on these things and it's not going to break, just for ultimate reliability. And the shape, the shape, rounded corners, so it's not going to catch on stuff. It's a 2-piece extruded aluminum chassis. And that enabled us to do some neat stuff with the way we have our top panel or end panel control. So that's really it. That's the whole DNA of the lineup. And then I'll just get into some into the models if you don't have any questions at this point, you guys.
1 second, Jay. We did get a message here on our comments. Mo's asking if you could go into a little bit more detail about the IRAD.
Oh yeah, I'll get into that in a little bit. Yeah,
that's coming, right? That's what I thought. Okay,
yeah, I got a whole page on that. So
all right, Jay's got you, Mo. He's coming. Just be patient.
I did want to jump in there. Back to that. To not to keep beating a dead horse and turning it into glue, but between that that salesperson and installer conversation we had before, and sort of how to approach how the product makes it really easy to kind of switch gears. So in this image here that Jason's got up right there, you can see the two you can see the black locking connectors that Jason was talking about earlier. In those cases where you have no audio, like Jason had pointed out earlier, you're literally just pulling that connector, plugging in a link LD, and then connecting the other end in. So that's as far as the work that's involved in switching gears if you have the quote unquote
I can show you. I don't know if you can
incorrect sale made up front.
If you can see it here, that's all you got to do. That's our inline load, and because we're using high wattage surface mount resistance in there, we can make it extremely small, so it's effectively just the same size as the plug itself. And you can stack them together as well if you need more loading, like certain cases, like some of the I think there's some Subarus that needed more, so you can just stack two of those together too to drop it down. And that, by the way, we didn't talk about what the resistance was, but by plugging one of those link LDs in there, it drops the total resistance down to 36 ohms. And if you have two of them in line, it's 20 ohms. So that handles all the known cases out in the field right now. So just very simple. Right. Yeah, good point.
So that's why when we say this the entire line kind of applies to anything that is coming in the front door.
Yeah.
Because even if the installers or the salesperson isn't sure of the application, or didn't check, or did check, but the consumer said it was not amplified and it was amplified or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever the cases are, when it gets to the back, you're simply pulling that connector that already has the high level wires connected to it. You're just pulling it out with no tools. You're plugging in that link LD and you're plugging it back in.
Yeah.
It'll take you longer to go to the peg to get it off the peg and rip it out of the plastic than it will to plug it in. And now it's solved and you go on.
I like it when the front and the back can still get along.
Yes. Yes, that's a good thing.
I like it when the customer gets their car on time and your base stays on schedule.
Yeah.
And everything doesn't get pushed back an hour because you're running around trying to find stuff, or you have to go out and order another part or pick up a part from another store down the road.
Mm-hmm. Providing workplace harmony, that's what we're all about.
So. That's it.
You need to make a t-shirt with that.
Yeah. Right. Well, cool. Well, so we'll just jump into the models, and I won't spend a particular amount of time on here. Just kind of cover what, now that everybody understands what makes us tick and why we sound the way we do and why we work the way we do. It all just comes down to features. So one other thing I wanted to show was that we had consolidated the lineup down to just the 6 core models now, and that this new Link DQ model came from that. It's actually in the same extrusion size as the original Link D. But it gets some nice features from the Link Q, which was also one of our top sellers, which is the remote ready, and it gets the parametric EQ from the Base Freak, which was a model we had last year, but all in this super small chassis size. So it's just slightly bigger or slightly longer than the Link LD, but it gives you true parametric EQ and remote ready. So the remote's not included anymore because in some cases the remote wasn't needed that came with the Link Q. Now it's this exact same remote, so it's backwards compatible, but it's just sold separately. And actually that combination now, even with the separate remote, which is called the Link RC, is actually a little bit less than the original Link Q was. So more performance at a little bit better price and smaller chassis size. So it's that's why we said on our website, game over. This really is the best LOC preamp that I think has ever been done, because it combines such needed core features for everyday installs, not just adding bass, but also as a standalone system preamp. If you use this for standalone systems like side-by-sides or motorcycles, which is where the Link Q was used quite often, this can also be used for that, and you can just have a whole system running off your phone or off a Bluetooth dongle. So OEM side, obviously, and aftermarket side as a line driver, like we were talking about before. And that's it. That's for the Link DQ. So it's really 3 models in one, and that's why we're able to keep our line so tight with such a wide application. Bass restore, I like to talk about this a little bit because this category has been around for over 30 years, you know, and there's been just so many products out there that's just been copying each other and copy after copy, and not really thinking about why the category exists and why things were done originally the way they were. Well, way back in the day, you know, 30 years ago, cars were quite different, but music was too, which was one of the main reasons why bass restoration was a thing. It's the music content really didn't have that much bass in there, but we were like we've done with everything. We saw a need in the market, we stepped back and started from scratch, and I think we've really reinvented this category of what it can be and what it should be, because this is a true preamp. None of the other products I'm aware of are actually preamps. This has all of our core DNA. It's got the up to 40 volts high level in, up to 10 volts RMS out. It's a line driver, but it does all the right things on that end, but it also improves and redefines how these things should work, because we are a true preamp now. We have the gain on the outside, on the top, so it can operate as a regular preamp, a regular LOC, even without the bass restoration. And all of the controls are on the top. So you've got full variable control over the effect limiter, which is, you know, the point where how much bass is being added back in real time. It's effectively remastering your music in real time. It's taking the harmonics from the upper bass and shifting it down and adding it in real time to add bass content that's not actually there in the recording, but because it's doing it in real time, it sounds like it really was recorded that way. And you can dial in how much of that effect you need. Obviously, some music has more need than others, and so that's why you would set this effect to a certain level, and then with the knob, besides all the top panel controls makes this unique, this knob it has never been done like this before, because we have the effect on the outer ring. So that's something you're probably not messing with most of the time. Whereas with any other approach to this kind of product, that's been your only control. Well, you can either turn the effect on or off, but because they're not true preamps, it's just a 1-to-1. So what you put in is what you get out. But because ours is a true preamp, we have the traditional bass knob, which is actually your sub level, your sub volume. And the effect is more like, okay, that's how much bass content you want added back in, how much bass restoration. But every song and every recording is not the same. So you can actually turn this on or off just by pushing the main knob. And so if you're listening to an old 80s rock tune that had no bass and you've got the effect on, if next song comes on is you know, a modern rap or R&B song, and it's just, you know, overpowering, you can just turn that off, but you still have the sub-level control, right? So you can still use it like, you know, your bass volume. And that is a big deal. And you know, even though we know we're primarily for installation point of view, there are a few things that customers do see and touch, and the remote is one of them. And that's why we spent so much time on our remotes, how they look and feel, but also how installable they are, which I'll get into in a minute. But that's kind of it with the bass restore. But really, that's why I'm saying, you know, this category needed reinvention, and I believe we've done it. And a big deal about it is actually the way we've designed the processing in there. You don't need a full range signal for it to operate. I've actually got it after a crossover in my system, and fell in love with all my old recordings all over again, because I can get some great bass now. So Link 2, already talked about that. That's just basically
Sorry, Jay.
Yeah.
I actually had a question, if you don't mind going back to this bass restore.
Yeah.
What if the amplifier, I'm looking at your diagram here, I was studying that while you were talking. So I get it for the OE. The aftermarket, I see on the diagram here, you basically got your front and rears going straight to the amplifier. You're taking the sub out from the head unit and going into your, okay. So in this scenario, what if the amplifier is DSP?
If the amplifier is DSP, then it's still going to add that content into the signal on its way into the DSP for sure. I mean, I think in a lot of cases, DSP amplifiers though usually don't have enough power built in for the sub channel. and so you would put this after on the pre-outs, if assuming the DSP amp has pre-outs, you would put this after that to the outboard mono amp that you're using to drive just the dedicated sub. But either way, you can put it in front or behind.
That's okay. So either in front or behind.
Yeah.
That was the question.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Cool.
I like how my questions have become a little bit more intricate, huh? You like that?
Yeah, you're doing great, man. Yeah, you're doing great. Yeah, so the Link 2 is for those systems where, say, the customer wants to add bass, but they already have a bass knob that came with their amplifier, so they don't necessarily need the remote level control, or they already have some kind of decent EQ built into the bass amp. And this, for the cost of this thing, the step up between this and a passive high to low is really insignificant for the amount of sound quality you're gonna get. And like we were talking about at the beginning, you're not gonna sell a customer a step up RCA with a plastic box, but you see this thing and say, look, this is really going to do what you need it to do in your system and get every watt and dB of sound quality out of that $500-600 mono amp you just bought. So it's really the go-to for adding on bass. Of course, it's a full range piece, so you can use multiples of them if you want to use it on the RCA pre-outs. The speaker level outs of any deck as well. So aftermarket or OEM. Okay, so that's it for the 2-channel guys, and then it's just the summing processors, and I've just got these all together here just to show that really the only difference between them is the number of channels, which comes down to application. So the way we sum is really important, and that's something that I want to just set out there from the outset. We do this completely differently than anybody else has done in the past. We at every summing stage, you get an output. So say, for example, you're summing a factory tweeter with a factory midler or mid bass, and that's already an appropriate frequency response for your aftermarket components. Well, in other designs, you basically sum down to only get 2 channels out, and that's all you get. But with ours, because you get the output at every stage, you may already be able to use that first sum stage. So say like a factory 2-way, you would on the Link 6, you would already get a 2 channels of full range output for your components, and then you still have another set of RCAs left for your bass. Or for that matter, the factory tweeter may already be appropriate, so you can get all 6 channels of output already usable, and just need to sum it down for where you want to change the crossover point on the mid. The only one that sums a little bit differently is the Link 4. That's just because it's only 4 channels that actually sums up to channel 1, 2, so you can still pass through the low frequencies for independent sublevel even when you're summing, which makes it really the only true 4-in 4-out LOC out there that can do that. And but then when you step up into Link 6 and Link 8, you can sum up to a 3-way on the Link 6 and still get independent sublevel control. Because we have a little switch. You can see it there in the bottom drawings there under channel 1, 2 on the Link 6 and Link 8. That actually allows you to reroute that sum signal back to the channel 1, 2 RCAs, so you can still get full range out and have a separate sublevel control that's affected by the remote. So that's it. I can do a quick little demo if we have time here. I've got it set up, but as I was talking about before with the remote, we thought about installation, of course, and you can take these things completely apart. Any of the models that have the LED comes on a little pigtail, so you can remote flush that. And specifically on the Link 4, 6, and 8, this is actually a proprietary design unique to us. There's actually a microcontroller inside of the main unit that the remote talks to. And just like anything else, when you first sell the system, say the customer didn't have an auxiliary source, but comes back later and says, "Hey, I want to add my a Bluetooth or an aux jack plug-in to this." You don't have to tear the whole thing out because this is all controlled at the remote. You can just flick these 2 switches on the back, and that controls what the main knob does. And out of the box, it's sub-level, the last 2 channels on the unit. But there are cases where you're going to use this only for aux, and you don't want the customer accidentally switching back over to the main speaker level inputs when there's nothing there. It's also the reason why the default is sub-level only, because you're usually using this for speaker level in. So you can use it as a standalone aux only. You can use it for speaker level input only, or a combination of the two, which may happen in some European vehicles that have really nasty volume dependent EQ. So in that case, this becomes your master system volume, and you just set the factory radio at a certain volume that sounds the best, where you got the cleanest signal, and then you use this as your master volume, and you just press and hold it, and that gives you your independent sublevel, which is actually in digital memory. It's remembered differently for the main source than it is for the aux source, which is important because usually, smartphones don't have that great a bass response. So you might want that different. So there's a few quick examples. Here's a 4-in 4-out application where I've got a factory 2-way coming in, and I sum that together. That comes out channel 1, 2 for your full range channels, and then channel 3, 4 is passing through that door woofer signal, and that gets used for your sub channel. So you can still use the remote for controlling bass level, even though it's summing a 2-way at the same time. Link 6, 6-in 4-out, you can take up to a 3-way factory system and sum that all together and still get a full range pair of channels out through channel 1, 2, and then have the sublevel on channel 5, 6. And then link 8, another reason what makes the summing so unique, besides the ability to get an output at every stage, is you can actually separate front and rear. So you can stop the summing at a point and then independently sum the rear, so you can preserve fading, and you can do that with the link 6 as well. So in this case, a two-way front, 2-way rear, you can sum those two ways together, but keep them separate, so you don't lose fading in the system. And there's many different versions of these diagrams. I just tried to pick a few that give some major use cases here, but the flexibility is just unparalleled because of the way we design these things. And if there's no more questions, I'll get into the IRAD on that.
Yeah, no, let's get into. We have like 5 minutes left, Jay.
Okay, cool. All right. So the IRAD is a really unique piece. We actually have a patent pending on this. Coming out of many years of doing this, there's a couple of major needs out there in the marketplace. First and foremost is nowadays it's getting really hard to find switched ignition in cars that are all bus driven. You may waste an hour trying to find the dang wire that you need to turn your system on and off, and not necessarily for our LOCs, because they all have automatic turn on, but maybe for a radar detector or a dash cam or something like that. And so these little guys are super tiny, and you can hide them virtually anywhere, and you just need to grab power and ground from anywhere in the system. Could be in the back, could be in the front, could be anywhere you need it to be. And in less than a minute, you can program this thing to learn your vehicle's running voltage and your vehicle's off voltage. And once you're done, within less than 1 minute, every time you start the car after that, it gives you a switch trigger out. So you can run small electronic devices off of it directly, anything that draws, like less than an amp. We actually have 2 outputs out of this, which to explain. So you may want to drive 2 separate devices, and you may want one to come on after the other. So there's also independent turn-on delays in there, which leads me to the second major use case, which is just purely for delay. In these days when we're mixing brands all the time, there's cases definitely where you get a huge system pop that you just can't seem to get rid of just because of the timing conflict between brands. And just throwing this right in the remote trigger line, you can delay up to 5 seconds turn on or 5 seconds turn off and eliminate all those system pops. But the timing also comes into play with the ignition generation, because a lot of vehicles nowadays are stop-start, right? They stop every time you come into a stoplight, and then they start again. Well, if you're depending on that engine running voltage for your trigger, then you would lose it every time the vehicle stopped, right? So we can delay up to 10 minutes on the ignition out turn off. So default would be probably 3 minutes. It would be a pretty long stoplight, but up to 10 minutes, which you can also use in side-by-sides and golf cars to keep from draining your main system battery when you're out there, tailgating or whatever. And then lastly, another big use case, which up until now has not really been solved, was because of the automatic ignition detection. We can actually use it in a third mode called the stop-start relay control mode, which intelligently operates a battery isolation solenoid. So every time the vehicle stops, it separates the main battery and the system battery, And while it's separated, the whole system would run off of the auxiliary system battery, so it never sees that voltage cranking drop every time the engine starts. Your system would reset and you get system pop and all that. Well, this completely isolates the system from that cranking voltage drop. And then as soon as the engine's running, it joins them back up together again. So you really only need a battery that's sufficient to drive the system while the vehicle stopped temporarily. And those are the main three applications, but there's all sorts of ways to use this. Anything from changing the timing to driving the solenoid to driving small electronic devices directly. And that's the IRAD. So Link LD, like I said, that's a really small little inline guy. You can see the image there of how it plugs in. And that's it. That's the whole line. And this little chart just explains the feature differences, but you can see on, the input sensitivity and max input voltage, all that kind of stuff is all the same throughout the line. So really easy line to understand and very easy to carry, which is the point. So dealers can have this in stock, ready to go, no matter what car rolls into the bay. So with that, Ben.
Well, I'll tell you what, our time is dwindling down, but I wanted to make a few comments. I wanted to give an opportunity to Romesh to comment as well. And I think that whole presentation really just reinforces what I was trying to get at, and that is it's a simplified range of product. It's easy to keep in inventory. It solves problems. It offers solutions. And then now with the cool things like the IRAD module that you've thrown into the mix, again, more solutions. I think the knob is very innovative. There's no other knob that's like that. And the fact that above and beyond the fact that just carrying these in inventory as an LOC or an active LOC, they're also a line driver. So this is a sound quality thing as well. So if you're going to put that kind of money for a customer to put into these more expensive amplifiers or components or whatnot, why not have proper input voltage?
Right, exactly.
That's my sum up. You go, Ramesh, your turn. That's what I have to say.
No, cents. You covered the main points really, right? Like even price of the amplifier, the downstream componentry isn't really as much of a consideration because a lot of it's driven by application. You could have the least expensive amplifier in your building going into, I don't know, I keep picking a Dodge, but let's say a Dodge Ram where they're removing a factory amp. Mm-hmm. Well, you can't just go put that other LOC in there. Right. And then it's the lost time in the bay. Mm-hmm. Right. It's not even whether you have the link on the shelf. It's if you didn't install it at the beginning, you got to uninstall it and come back. Yeah. Right. If you had a link 2 in there, which would be the least expensive, part in the line, probably a bass restorer would be ideal for that application, but or even a DQ, but even a Link 2 would just go in there, but you wouldn't have an issue because even if the salesperson didn't know up front, the installer has a way out, which is just right. So,
and that bass restorer is also a line driver, right? It's just a Link 2 that's not a line driver.
That's the only one, yeah.
All right, and to kind of bring this full circle, you look at the customers today. You're looking at the type of source material that that everybody's playing, right? Mm-hmm. I like to think everybody is listening to Sirius XM. That's a great choice. But I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of us.
Yeah, but even use Sirius XM, you can still add more bass.
A lot of us are playing from our phones. Let's be honest. A lot of us plug in our phones, whether it's through a mini phono jack. If your phone still has a mini phono jack, mine didn't. Right. Like my last 3 phones doesn't have a mini phono jack, but or Bluetooth. Wink, wink, hint, hint. That's probably something coming down the pipe from Wavtech, I'm sure. Anyhow, either way, the point is that bass restorer would certainly do that input source some good.
Sure. Yeah,
absolutely.
What are you holding there, Jay?
I was with a toy there. Because we were talking about how we make things easy. Well, on our Link 8 here, if you can see that, let me get it so it's not shiny. So I can just get it started here. Just by manipulating the switches on here, that's my factory tweeter, that's my factory mid, that's my factory sub, and just by manipulating these switches here, I can sum all these together to get a flat frequency response. But not only that, but because this is actually in this case it's actually a 3-way, by adjusting the gains, I can get my nice little RTA curve right there just by adjusting the way that it mixes together. And that's what gives us that huge application coverage, is because these things are so flexible the way they can sum. I can actually do that without any EQ.
All right.
And
guys,
yeah,
we're out of time. But
Wow. Already.
That was a really good one.
That went
very
quick,
informative.
yeah.
I know if you're watching live, you're going to watch this on demand. Everything you need to know about Wavtech is in this last hour. So, Jay,
Thanks a lot, Jay.
thanks
Appreciate
a lot.
it.
Can't thank you enough for taking the time today.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
And Mr. Romesh,
Yes.
I will talk to you in a second. Thank you, Jay.
All right. Take care, you guys.
Thanks, Jason.
Inventory wise, good to go. I would imagine.
Lots of inventory. It comes in as it comes in fast and it goes out almost just as fast. So, inventory is good.
And just to remind dealers listening, Wavtech distributed exclusively by the good folks at Importel.
Talk to your sales rep. Call in. Talk to one of our reps on the phone. Talk to me. Talk to anybody here. We'll get you sorted out.
Sounds good. Rogo, always a pleasure, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
There you have it, guys. Wavtech, Jason Kemmerer, thank him for being with us, and Romesh, of course, from Importel. You want to get onto the Wavtech, stock some up, because I strongly recommend you do. Make sure you give the folks at Importel a call. Apparently, the inventory is pretty good, so no worries about that. And hey, what a better time than right now to start integrating. All right, that's it for your connected lunchtime learning session presented by SiriusXM for today. I'll be back here on Wednesday and Friday, so thanks for tuning in. Until next time, we connect.